What's up everyone, Taiki here. Today I'll go over why I decided to short $1 million worth of Ethereum alongside a basket of altcoins. I'll go over my bear thesis and why I think ETH and alts have topped for the cycle. So let's get right into it. Just to show the receipts, here are my on-chain short positions. So I shorted $1 million of Ethereum at roughly 41.54. My unrealized P&L is roughly 65K or so. And I'm also short this basket of altcoins. Without further ado, let's go over why I'm doing this. So let's get right into the slideshow. This is the agenda for the video, so let's get right into it. So October 10th was a crazy day in markets. We had billions of liquidations, lots of coins went down a lot, and now everyone's acting like everything is okay, right? Oh, we're gonna see alt season recover to V-shape, recover to all-time highs. But I don't think it's that simple, and I think there's a reasonable chance that a few months from now, we'll look back on October 10th and say, yeah, that was the beginning of the bear market for Ethereum. So I think most of us, at this point, know that most alts have zero value, and the only utility for holding altcoins is to sell into this magical Q4 pump that we were all promised because it happened twice, once in 2021 and second time in 2017. So the 4-year cycle, the idea behind this is very controversial. My opinion is that I don't really think it matters what you believe or like what I believe in it. I just think that what matters is that people are positioned for it and people are aware of it. And I think a lot of people are looking to sell into Q4 or maybe early Q1, but there is going to be an expiration date for holding these things. In TradFi, or I guess crypto too, with the options, there's this concept of time decay or data decay. And basically, this is a decrease in an option's value over time as the expiration date approaches. So even if the underlying asset is flat, as time passes, the value of the option goes down because you're betting on volatility. So I think there's a similar element to this with altcoins as well. I think as we approach end of year, the willingness of the average market participant to hold ETH or hold altcoins just goes down over time. What happens where, if we're in mid to late December and prices for alts are flat? I think people are going to be selling out of altcoins because they fear that the cycle might be over. There is an expiration date to holding these alts. So you can kind of replace the y-axis and x-axis, where maybe the y-axis is the utility, right? Or the willingness for the average market participant to hold an altcoin. But over time, maybe today there's some utility, but over time, as we approach end of year, the utility goes down. And I think this is the biggest risk to markets. What happens to ETH and altcoins if the guaranteed Q4 pump that we were all promised with voodoo magic does not materialize? It could be pretty reflexive to the downside as people panic. So I think it's fairly clear, the bear case for altcoins, right? I kind of posted this as a meme, right? Where I think altcoins are just gonna go down over time. And it kind of reflects this Binance Futures Top 50, which is kind of crazy. So of course, prices of coins are down, but maybe the market cap is going up and whatnot. And before you get upset at me, I'm not really bearish your altcoin, right? But think about the guy that you hate, right? The guy with the punchable face. His altcoins are going to go down, right? I'm bearish his altcoins, not yours, right? So just don't get too upset at me. But this idea is that, yeah, most of these coins, they started their vesting schedules, all these unlocks. Who is going to buy these things? I can definitely identify the seller, but I can't really identify the buyer, which in my opinion makes them pretty good short ideas. And I think October 10th, we all knew this already, but we all knew that altcoins are going to eventually go down over time. But that was like a shock, right? It was like, oh my God, it actually happened. It can happen in a matter of 2 hours. So I think the path of all these altcoins going down is preordained, but I think it's going to accelerate, right? October 10th marks a regime change where it's going to accelerate altcoins going down to the downside. And the state of the altcoins, so this is me, doing some bottom-up analysis of, yeah, altcoins are fucked. And then how is Ethereum, or how does Ethereum tie into this, right? So I think the state of the altcoins right now do not support an ETH valuation of $500 billion, $500 billion market cap. On-chain is dead. Farms are pretty weak, right? There's nothing happening on-chain. But Ethereum is at a $500 billion market cap. Why? Stablecoins? What? Institutional adoption? Well, let me debunk those arguments, right? Stablecoins are on Ethereum. People keep saying this to me. The thing is, yes, tokenization is cool, but it doesn't really reflect to more transaction fees for Ethereum mainnet, right? The path of all these stablecoins and like tokenized stocks or whatever, right? It's been going up. But if you look at the amount of gas fees, right, that Ethereum is generating, it's barely anything, right? ETH is not ultrasound money, right? It's very inflationary right now. It is great, right? Tokenization is fantastic. I do think it makes sense from a fundamental perspective, like why should we tokenize stocks and whatnot. But the problem is that it doesn't really necessarily mean that crypto infra becomes significantly more valuable. I mean, literally, this is like the price of Ethereum overlaid to the chart of Tether, the market cap. And I mean, Ethereum literally went to $1,400 when the stablecoin market cap was going up, right? I don't really think there's a correlation here. I think it's mostly just noise, and it's just people just like trying to pump Ethereum as a narrative. And I think a really good example is the Arbitrum and Robinhood partnership. Robinhood is deploying its own L2 using the Arbitrum Orbit stack, and they're trying to tokenize stocks and whatnot. So, cool, right? That makes a lot of sense, right? The Robinhood is getting into perps. They're going to tokenize stocks, right? Maybe do some DeFi and stuff. And Robinhood stock is up only. And surely the partnership with Arbitrum should be bullish, right? No, it's going down only, right? And I think this is like a hard pill to swallow, where if you think about it, the public blockchain infrastructure, or the token itself, right, it doesn't really gain anything from Robinhood using it, whereas Robinhood gains a lot from using it, right? They can latch onto the blockchain narrative. They can maybe make more money charging fees and whatnot, right? So it's one of those things where private and public companies like building apps on blockchains may accrue to value, but the infrastructure doesn't really gain much value, right? And this is like a hard pill to swallow, and that's why I don't really buy into this idea that stablecoins good. I mean, they are good, but it's not. That doesn't necessarily mean that Ethereum is going to pump right to like $25,000. And to piggyback on that, to stay on chain. Yeah, I mean, it's cool, right? Stablecoin supply is going up, but if you really think about it, I mean, I am an active farmer on chain. I use the chain almost every single day, or I mean, definitely every single week, right? But there really is not much to do. And the problem with the stablecoin thesis is, the yields really compress sharply if the bid for alts disappears, right? And we are seeing in real time the bid for altcoins disappearing. Because a lot of people say, I can't wait to farm stables at like at 25% in the bear market, right? I can't wait to sell the top into the parabolic rally in Q4 and then farm stables for the rest of time and then make a bunch of money. I mean, that sounds great on paper, but where does the yield come from, right? The yield comes from people buying altcoins, right? And farmers dumping altcoins. Take Plasma, for example. Farmers farmed this thing for over a course of a few months. They got into the ICO at a good price. Retail buys into it, right, after the token generation event, calling for alt season, and then farmers dump it, right? And then, the crypto Twitter and like retail traders, call the Plasma team scammers. No, you just literally bought a farm token. And as people wisen up to this idea that you shouldn't buy farm tokens or altcoins, I think it's going to trickle down to Ethereum eventually, right? Because, as the yields for stablecoins come down, there's less utility to hold stables on chain. Of course, if you're living in Turkey, right, and you want to escape your local currency, that's great. But it's not like you're just like aping it in like random, yield farms or like, meme coins, right? And I do think that this is like how, the alt weakness, right, the altcoin weakness that we're seeing now is eventually going to catch up to Ethereum. Right, it's going to trickle down or trickle up to Ethereum, and I call this trickle down Dumpanomics, or trickle up Dumpanomics, like whatever it ends up being, right? Because these narratives are very, very reflexive, and I do think that, I mean, demand for block space is already like very like near zero, but I do think that it could get even worse, right? Think about what you can do on chain right now, not much. There might be less opportunities in the future, which, as a farmer, that's very sad, but it might be the reality, right? And I think a lot of people are way too complacent on this idea of this magical Q4 pump, and if people don't see that, people are going to panic, and that's the downside that I expect for not only altcoins, right? Because altcoins have already gone down, but Ethereum is still hovering around $4,000. I don't think the state of on-chain, the state of altcoins support that valuation. So that kind of goes into why I'm short $1 million worth of Ethereum. I've shared this chart many times, right? In the past month or so, I've shared this chart of like why I'm like, short altcoins and like taking profits and whatnot. And I really think that this is a really good chart that kind of goes over different stages of the cycle. So phase one is the accumulation, sellers are getting exhausted, buyers stepping in, and there's some consolidation before we enter phase two, which is the wealth creation mode, right? Which is where like believers get rewarded, people are euphoric, and then it leads to phase three, which is there's some distribution, which could lead to like random alt seasons, right? Bitcoin and Ethereum are not pumping anymore. Let's buy these random altcoins. They go up 10x. But at some point, there's no more marginal buyers, and we enter phase 4, walls, destruction, down chop. And I think we are in phase 4 right now, where, large liquidations often signal the transition. Every good news gets immediately retraced. So we've seen this a few times this past 2-3 weeks or so, where like markets go up, people are like calling for altsies again, V-shaped recovery, and then 3 days later we just fully retrace. And good news pump, bad, nothing happens, and then we just go down. And over time, longs just get destroyed. There's going to be a lot of churn. People get disappointed. And at some point, people are going to just continue to capitulate out of their altcoins, out of crypto maybe, right? Into cash or even stocks. And at some point, we're going to enter a lull phase where, we're not going to do anything for the next few weeks or few months. I'm not sure if we're in phase 4 or phase 5. Maybe Bitcoin is near on phase 5. But I think, Ethereum and alts can still, there's still like a moderate amount of downside left for both Ethereum and alts. And by the way, this is pure chart crime, right? But I'm just doing this because it's kind of fun. Okay, maybe it's not so fun, but I'm doing it regardless. But, stick with me here. So if you kind of overlay this chart for Ethereum over the past, let's say 6 months or so, we had the consolidation after the tariff stuff, consolidation. We had phase 2 with wealth creation, phase 3 with distribution. And I think we're kind of in this wealth destruction / down chop where, yes, we're going to see some random pumps. Ethereum might pump 10%, but we're going to just eventually retrace that pump in the next 2 weeks or so. And then, before you know it, right, Ethereum is grinding lower. And then at some point, we're going to enter the chop / lull phase. And I do think that the markets, require some time to heal. I think the October 10th liquidations were a significant event. I think people are still recovering from it. I think it's going to be really, really hard for people to just believe in crypto, especially after things literally went to zero. And I do think that we need to repair ourselves. And, the dangers now, right, is that, if people don't get the Q4 pump that they're hoping for, and there's like some theta decay in holding alts, that could lead to a reflexive loop to the downside, where maybe some DATs start selling, some long-term holders start selling, and that's gonna be a scary time if you are like all in balls deep altcoins. So full disclaimer that I do want to talk about, I like the videos I've been making the past few weeks to a few months, where I'm just like aggressively taking profits, shorting altcoins, calling for like Ethereum and altcoin stopping. It is very, very opinionated, right? But for me, as a trader / investor, I have strong opinions loosely held. It's not that I want these coins to go to zero, right? I am a bull at heart. I mean, realistically, I can make a lot more money in a bull market, and I don't want these coins to go down. But I just think it's a realistic path going forward. So as a trader, I have to position myself for it. I think it's fairly clear from my perspective that there's a lot of downside in markets, so I am going short. And funding is positive, so I get paid to short. And I also get to farm some airdrop points. But if I am wrong, right, and we just start ripping and ETH hits 5K, then I'll come out here and say that I was wrong. People clowning for it, but like it's okay, right? The reason I'm making these videos is because I've round tripped so many times before, just because I wanted like one last pump, right? People on Twitter, people on YouTube promised me one last pump. It has to happen. But then, if everyone's looking for the one last pump, and if everyone's like looking to sell Ethereum at $6,000, who's going to buy it up there, right? And that's something you want to at least think about. Who is the marginal buyer? Who is the marginal seller? How are people positioned? And what happens if XYZ does not happen? And I'm also trying to incorporate on-chain elements because, as an active on-chain user, I just look at the state of on-chain and it just makes me bearish. A lot of farmers that I know are also bearish. Like I said, I get it, right? I've been getting a lot of hate because no one wants to hear that we've talked, right? Because, everyone wants to hear that we're going to keep pumping, right? All season, like it's going to happen, right? But I'm sure if you want to hear a bullish take on markets, just go to other YouTubers, go to other Twitter influencers, like, you'll get those. If you want to feed into your confirmation bias, like, you can do that. I'm not even saying I'm going to be right, but at least I'm offering a different take. And I do want to go over like final thoughts and how to approach markets, right? Because it's not all about being all in or all out or going 5x long or 5x short. It's more nuanced than that. It's not black and white. There's gray areas and you can do different things and it's okay. My view, like I said, is that I think Bitcoin can decouple from markets, right? Because my bearishness is mostly in Ethereum and altcoins. Altcoins are cooked, therefore it should trickle down or up into Ethereum. But maybe Bitcoin is fine. There's a chance that Bitcoin just recovers or Bitcoin goes sideways over the next few months, but altcoins just get smoked, right? I do think that whatever happens in the next few weeks to few months, it's going to be a K-shaped recovery that favors those with patience, airdrop farmers, and things that actually have good tokenomics. So a K-shaped recovery looks like this, where following like a crash, right? People use this analogy during COVID and stuff, where like tech stocks pumped, right? But like food services went down or something, right? So I think you can kind of apply the same to crypto, where that things will recover. Of course, Bitcoin, I think the narrative for Bitcoin is great. And maybe coins with buybacks. So maybe like Hyperliquid and maybe some of your altcoins, right? But the coins that's going to just get absolutely smoked are the ones that I'm short, right? I'm not saying Ethereum is like overvalued infra. That is what I'm saying. But I have nothing against Ethereum, right? But I'm short like Sui, like Plasma, like Arbitrum, like Optimism, Movement Labs, right? Like these coins with unlocks. Like who's buying them? But I know exactly who's selling, right? The insiders, VCs, they have to sell, especially even VCs, right? They also fear the end of the 4-year cycle. So something to at least consider. And I guess from a risk management perspective and portfolio construction perspective, you can even argue that I'm doing something that's super excessive, right? Like why am I even short? Why not just stay in cash? But from my perspective, right, I'd rather be wrong and be sidelined than be max long and be wrong to the downside. Because if I'm wrong and I'm holding cash and I'm farming stables on chain, airdrop farming, I can just buy back in whenever, right? It's not a big deal, right? People will clown me, people will make fun of me, people will troll me. I don't really care, right? I'll just buy back in. It's fine. But if I'm just like all in long, like believing in this Q4 pump, and we just like start nuking, like that's how people get absolutely destroyed, right? So it's not that you have to be 100% cash or 100% long. I think there's a balance to be had there, right? Why not be 50% long, 50% cash, right? This is not like actually like the way to do it, but maybe a good rule of thumb is if you think that there's like a 30% chance that the cycle might be over, because it's not zero, right? It's not zero, 30% chance. Maybe it makes sense to have roughly 30% in cash, farming stuff. I think that's totally okay. A cash is a position. Machi Big Brother said this, right? One of the sharpest minds of the industry, right? August 13th, the biggest skill will always be walking from the casino. It's really, really easy. Or I think the hardest part about holding stables is the FOMO, right? Because you take profits, you hold cash, and then things start pumping, right? Your friends start making money. They call you poor, or whatever, right? It just feels bad. And then it's really easy to take profits, but then buy back in like some other coin 2 weeks later. But that's usually how people get smoked. That's how I got smoked in the past. If you can't walk away from the casino, if you can't sit in cash and be okay with it, missing out on pumps, you'll always give it all back. And I know I share Machi's post because he posted this August 13th, and then October 16th, he's getting liquidated for his entire balance. He made 40 million profits, and then he just like gave it all back. And then he added more to his position and like made it all back or like lost it all, right? So it's really, really hard. It's really easy to like say this, but it's really hard to actually do it. I'll be honest, right? Like I'm 100% in cash, net short. Sometimes I just feel kind of bad, right? Ethereum pumped like 4,200 and then people are tagging me in Telegram, right? People are trolling me on Twitter, right? It kind of feels bad. But I think it does take an element of maturity to be like, yeah, like it's okay. I don't care, right? If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And, I have an opinion about the markets. Let me express that opinion and be a little contrarian. And I think from a farmer's perspective, because I'm a farmer, right? I farm stuff. Because I've been farming so many things over time, I have a lot of future crypto exposure via airdrops. So if the markets keep going up, my future airdrop is going to be worth more, right? Because where does the yield come from? The yield comes from people buying altcoins. What are airdrops? They're altcoins. So if we're in alt season, my airdrops are going to pump, right? If we're in a bear market, my airdrops are going to like tank, but I can hedge by just having some cash. I think farming is great. I think farming realistically is the most sustainable way for retail to outperform in crypto, just because all these tokens launch at such high valuations that it's really, really hard to make money buying altcoins when they launch. So I think the natural reaction function as retail should be to farm these things. So when they do launch high and people start buying them, you can just sell, right? So I think that's kind of what I'm trying to do. So I'm farming things like Polymarket, Lighter, Variational, USD AI, right? If we're going to be in alt season, my airdrops are going to cook. If we're in a bear market, at least I'm short, at least I'm in cash, right? I'm putting myself in a position to get lucky, right? Think about all the people that made money from Hyperliquid, right? The airdrop. A lot of people, right, call them lucky. Maybe they are, right? But the reality is they put themselves in a position to get lucky. And that's all we can do. And to wrap things up, it's like the seesaw idea, right? Where at different stages of the cycle, it makes sense to be max long or max humble farmer, right? Or maybe like 50-50 or whatever. So maybe right now the risks are balanced to the upside and downside. So maybe it makes sense to be balanced. But sometimes going max long is justified. Maybe that time is now because you have some whatever thesis, right? But sometimes humble farming is justified. I think right now for me, humble farming is justified. You can argue I'm not even being humble because I'm like just aggro shorting Ethereum. But hey, like I have like stops and like I have rules in place. So I try to be humble, right? I'm not sure if it's like as simple as like let's all hold our coins together and then sell into the guaranteed Q4 pump, right? Like I just don't really see it. Doesn't mean that it can't happen, but I think this mindset could get a lot of people in trouble. So I encourage you to. I'm not saying you should like definitely listen to me, right? But I encourage everyone to at least reconsider if this even makes any sense, right? Like we even range bound between like 3.5 to like 5K like in Ethereum for months, right? Like who's gonna buy above 6K, right? Like I really don't see it, and what even concerns me, and when I saw this, this is like when I actually shorted like Ethereum, right? The position that I have on, like ETHzilla. First of all, like these DATs are super dumb, right? I didn't even think that they're gonna start selling like their coins like this year. I thought it's gonna happen like next year or something. But like these guys, they start just selling, right? And if you really think about it, like most of these DATs, digital asset treasury companies, they're just cash grabs. Like these people don't actually believe that they're doing a great thing, right? They're just doing this because they want to make money, right? The leadership, they just want to make money, right? Like this guy, right? Nothing against this guy, right? He's richer than me, right? He's retired. He's gonna buy mansions, whatever. Like this guy was like, why did he choose Solana DAT, right? He literally said, oh, there's too many Bitcoin DATs. So I decided to go Solana because it could pump harder. Like what even is that, right? Like these things deserve to get washed out, right? And if anything, these DATs were a public good for all crypto because you could actually sell your crypto into these bids, right? They telegraph their buys ahead of time, so you can like literally buy before and then sell into them. So like maybe that was the trade, right? And like this is like funny. This happened like yesterday. So Sequans, like whatever, right? They bought like 3,200 Bitcoin and they just moved roughly a third of that into Coinbase. And if you kind of like overlay like the price with like the deposits, that's kind of when Bitcoin started dumping, right? It's like these treasury companies, we thought they were going to be paper, like diamond hands, like they're not going to sell, but they're starting to sell, right? We often look at these DATs as a source of buy pressure, but they could also sell, right? And like, what if 80 to 90% of the DAT buy pressure is already past us? What if over the next 12 months, they stop buying? Maybe they start selling. What does that do to market confidence, to markets? If the precedence is set that, these companies will sell Ethereum to protect its like NAV, right? Multiple to NAV, then that could get scary, right? That could get scary, potentially. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it could get scary. And like Sequans, I mean, they bought like 400 mil of Bitcoin. And I'm not sure if it's correct. I think it's correct because I looked at other sources, but like they literally bought Bitcoin at like 15K average price. And then they're selling at like 114. Like, how does that make any sense, right? Like these people are paper hands. And it's kind of just bubble type behavior, right? It's like very cash grabby type of behavior. And to wrap things up, when you watch this video, I'm not like really trying to convince you that it's all going to go to zero, right? I agree that I'm taking an excessive action by just shorting, right? Maybe it's enough that I just hold cash. But I've been selling my swap bags, like adding the shorts. Anyways, I mean, maybe I'm not even following this advice. But anyways, take care of the downside. and the upside will take care of itself, right? Crypto offers so many opportunities, but you have to be there. It's really easy to say that you'll be around in a bear market, but in my experience, people don't stick around in a bear market, right? People always say that in a bull market, then they lose their money and then they just leave, right? It's a lot easier to stick around. It's a lot easier to pay attention if you have cash, if you're stable farming. And like I said, there are times to justify, there are times to be max long, there's time to, take profits. I think, right, we can all agree that the risks have been elevated. The DATs, they're starting to sell. Like we're near the end of the 4-year cycle. There's some data decay in altcoins maybe. Bitcoin is losing momentum, right? There's a lot of warning signals. It's whether or not you actually take those warning signals and put them to action. So like I said, I'm not saying that you should do this or that. I'm just saying, hey, these are the reasons why I'm short Ethereum, short altcoins, why I'm 100% in cash. I'm trying to learn from my past mistakes. And hey, if I lose, cool, right? I can be the scapegoat for people to be alt season because Taiki got liquidated, right? I'm fine with that, So yeah, that's gonna be it for me. So that's why I've been short Ethereum, short altcoins. I'm not sure what there is to say, but I hopefully through this video I gave you an alternate point of view. I'm bullish, right? I'm always bullish on crypto. I'm a very optimistic and optimistic person. But sometimes it makes sense to at least take a step back. Because hey, if I'm bullish crypto and I think price is gonna go down, I'll just sit back, let price come down, let people panic, and hopefully I can just buy coins lower, right? That's my ultimate goal, right? I want to accumulate cash. I want to be farming. So if coins go lower, I can buy more. I can buy the blood. And just take the coins away from the weak hands, right? But maybe I'm the weak hands. I don't know. We're all trying. We're all trying our best here, right? Anyways, that's gonna be it for me. I'm short. Hopefully, you guys can all buy your Ethereum to try to liquidate me. But I worry that everyone's already positioned. Anyways, thank you guys. I'll see you guys another time. Bye bye.